truth, logic, common sense, that gut feeling, and yes, even a little psychoanalysis, as we are once again together, you and I, to discuss Chad and Lori Daybell. But we're also going to be discussing someone who's in the middle of all this, but we haven't talked about him as much. Yes, we're talking about Alex Cox, and I have been doing a lot of research, and I've been analyzing the indictment on Chad and Lori in this capital case. And I've been looking at things, and questions have popped up. And when they pop up for me, I start going down these rows of discovery, and I'm hoping you will help me along. This pre-record is going to be a little bit complex, but it has a lot of theory, it has a lot of analysis, and it definitely has research in it. So Alex Cox, we know that he was in the middle of all this. Many of us have our own hypotheses that he was the actual muscle guy. He was the one that actually murdered Tammy, JJ, and Tylee. Okay, that's my theory. Many of y'all believe the same. And so I got to looking at the indictment that was put together by the grand jury. And I want to go through this with y'all because I want your take on it. But before we do that, I have to set certain foundational lenses in order to get to where I want to go. And many times when I discuss these things with you, I try my very best to demonstrate how I move along and get through it to get to the, I guess what you call the meat and potatoes of the questions that I have been trying to run down. So just bear with me. I hope you will take the time to learn something as I have learned. And we will just look through this and I might even put on a defense attorney's hat in and out of this pre-record, okay? Now, conspiracy to commit murder and murder, okay, those are two separate felony offenses in Idaho. They carry the same weight, okay? We already know this. We've talked about it. If you conspire to murder somebody, you might as well be murdering them yourself, right? But a capital case indictment on this holds many clues that OKJ's been looking through. You know, I try to go through things in different, just kind of just going from one direction to another to try to analyze different things, to really try to get to the questions that I have that I want to bring out. Now, it has many clues, the indictment does. It has a lot of information, and we've gone over that indictment. And the state of Idaho has to prove what is in that indictment, okay? We already know this. But overall, the state over anything else, the foundation of it all, has to be what? They have to prove criminal intent. We have probable cause affidavits. We have the death penalty, where they came out with the document on the death penalty, the indictment, the grand jury indictment itself. And we have these clues, but we don't have all the evidence. And we will get to all the evidence in the trial that the state will lay out. But through analysis, I wanted to jiggle my brain a little bit, you know. I wanted to develop more questions for which I could research and gain more justice through understanding. These charges that Chad and Lori face, along with the code and statutes that are listed in the indictment on Chad and Lori, in total, okay, now listen up. You'll learn something because I did. You have to do the footwork. I've done the footwork and I'm sharing it with you. Chad has 8 charges in that indictment on him. Lori has 6 charges in the indictment on her. And if you put aside the legal language of known and unknown or did order or command the murder or whatever, Alex has 3 charges where he is specifically named. His name is in it. But he is not specifically named in the actual first-degree murder. Only in the 3 charges of conspiracy to commit murder. And I wondered why that was. I was like, well, if we all have this theory that Alex actually murdered Tammy, or, well, a lot of us think that Chad murdered Tammy, but just for sake of argument, let's look at the kids. If everyone thinks that Alex actually did the physical murder, the first-degree murder of Tylee and JJ, why isn't he listed in the indictment under first-degree murder? Only conspiracy. Well, I got to thinking about that question, and as you know, every time I come up with this stuff, it answers more for me. It fills in that mosaic for me. And the only thing that I can really come up with on this, and you have to keep in mind that the grand jury met to develop these charges, is that Alex is deceased, and that the state didn't want to have to prove that Alex actually murdered, that the state didn't want to prove that Alex actually murdered the children, but they have to actually prove that Lori and Chad murdered the children, okay? But it is certain that Chad and Lori are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and they've also been charged with first-degree murder. In fact, counts 1, 3, and 5, conspiracy to commit murder, Chad, Lori, and Alex are all listed. Counts 2, 4, and 6, the actual first-degree murder of these people, it just says Chad and Lori. And if it's legal to charge Alex with conspiracy to commit murder in this case, then why wouldn't they also go ahead and charge him with first-degree murder? So I thought, well, it has to be because the state doesn't want to have to go in there with the indictment from the grand jury saying Alex actually committed first-degree murder alongside conspiracy to commit murder like Lori and Chad. So I was like, okay, that's good news, really, and was smart, really. That's what the state put in front of the grand jury, asked them what charges they thought that Lori and Chad should get. And if you think about it, if, say, the grand jury would have come out and charged Alex, even though, because they charged him with conspiracy to commit murder, why wouldn't they give him first-degree murder? Well, that would really be a good thing for the defense teams of Lori and Chad. If they had to sit there and watch the state prove that Alex actually physically murdered the kids, then that makes their clients be the ones that didn't physically murder the kids, right? And many would say, well, KJ, if they got conspiracy to commit murder, they were able to say first-degree murder separately from it because conspiracy to commit murder and murder are the same thing in terms of penalties. If that's the case, and it is, then why again wasn't Alex charged with first-degree murder? He only was charged with conspiracy to commit murder. He's dead on a doornail. The state has to focus in on Lori and Chad and proving first-degree murder in that aspect. But we get to the indictment that we're discussing now, and the fact that there are overt acts listed in the indictment. And just a refresher, an overt act in criminal law is an action which might be innocent itself, but if part of the preparation and active furtherance of a crime, can be introduced as evidence of a defendant's participation in the crime. So these overt acts are listed in the indictment. And in the indictment, there are 25 overt acts listed. All right, now listen up. I analyzed the indictment, and I found that Lori did 14 out of 25 overt acts in the indictment, all right? Chad did 8 out of 25 overt acts in the indictment, and Alex did 8 out of 25 overt acts in the indictment. So, in definition of the crimes themselves and possible Idaho grand jury instructions, which, when we're talking about jury instructions, y'all, you think of a trial jury, but a grand jury can't just go and meet and not have any jury instructions. So here we go. I thought I would throw all this out here and see what you could help OKJ with. Here it is. Who says that Alex actually murdered anyone? Now, I know, y'all know how I feel about it. I feel like Alex did. But if you're looking at the legalese of all of this, in the indictment itself, it does not say that Alex actually murdered anyone. He just conspired. If Alex were alive today, what would his defense be? Would he be charged with actual first-degree murder? I believe he would, but because he's deceased, the state wanted to chisel down what they had to prove. They're going to be able to prove Alex's conspiracy in this. Let's look at Alex's overt acts in the indictment, because again, folks, Alex Cox was never in the indictment under first-degree murder, the actual felony of murder, like Chad and Lori are, but he was listed as a co-conspirator. So let's look at it. And I'm looking at them right now under this indictment. The first one is on or about September 9th of 2019. Alex Cox did go to 565 Pioneer Road, apartment 175 in Rexburg, Idaho. And we know what that was overnight there. Remember, we heard all about it. He wasn't usually over at Lori's that late. And they're saying that this is a way to prove that he conspired with Lori and Chad to murder Tylee, all right? But again, I told y'all I would put on a defense's hat. He could have been going over there for anything. Lori could have called him over there. She could have actually, just like the indictment says, she murdered Tylee and had Alex come in and take Tylee away. Or he came overnight and Lori had already murdered Tylee and they just tried to figure out what they were going to do. And the next day, Tylee was transported out to Chad's when Chad gave Tammy that text message and said that he was shot a raccoon, or, there's all kinds of things that the state is they would not list this particular overt act unless something went along with it that proves it's not just about, hey, jury, Alex Cox, he conspired with Lori and Chad because he went over to Lori's late at night. What does that prove, right? We know what it means, and the state wants it to mean what it means, but will a jury look at that overt act and say that Alex conspired with Lori? Another overt act, and remember, Alex only had 3 listed in the whole indictment, was on or about September 9th, on or about September 23rd, Alex Cox did take possession of J.J. Vallow. Okay, now let's stop. We all knew that this, from what we understand, that Alex transported JJ's body out to Chad's. There was a 17-minute window there. We all discussed it, talking about the grave had already been dug. There's no way Alex could have gotten all these materials, the paneling, the rocks, the grave dug in 17 minutes. He just went out there to take JJ out there to deposit him, okay? But again, a defense attorney, if Alex Cox was still alive, he would say, show me the picture. Show me the picture of Alex loading JJ up in the back of the truck. Show me that you know for a fact. Alex could have went out to Chad's for 17 minutes for any reason in the world. You see what I'm saying? Again, the state has to prove through an overt act the criminal intent that Alex Cox conspired to murder JJ. Okay? And so, whatever they have, let's hope it's more than just they see him on GPS going out to Chad's for 17 minutes. Let's just, because nobody knows how long he'd been buried there. No one knows for a fact that JJ was brought out that morning. No one really has a grasp on when actually JJ was murdered. I said sometime Sunday evening, maybe in overnight, Sunday to Monday, but he could have been murdered the day before on Sunday, before Melanie Gibb and David Warwick left on Monday. This is something that I'm trying to kind of flesh out, y'all. The bottom line is they have Alex going out there, and then many of y'all also said just because Alex's phone is showing going out to Chad's, couldn't Lori have been carrying Alex's phone? You see, these are things that are going to have to be cleaned up by the state. And finally, you've got Alex Cox obtained a burner phone on October 9th of 2019, and we know that Tammy was shot at that time. But just because he obtained a burner phone on that same day, which it is a healthy inference, unless they have the data off that phone, the bottom line is what does that have to do with conspiracy to commit murder on JJ, Tylee, and Tammy? Well, in this case, if you look at the date, it would mean that this is specifically talking about the conspiracy to commit murder on Tammy. If you look at the one before, Chad obtained a burner phone on September 18th. Well, Chad Daybell got a burner phone on September 18th, and Alex got one on October 9th. It'd be different if they both obtained a burner phone on the same day or around the same day. You see what I'm saying? Again, the state obviously is going to have to, they're making their topic statement there in the overt acts. Maybe they do. I hope they do. It's not just about, hey, jury, Alex Cox got a phone on October 9th, the same day he attempted to murder Tammy. Well, there's nothing in the indictment on attempted murder on Tammy, is there? The bottom line is that, this is something that the state is going to have to look at. Then you've got, and I misspoke. Alex has more than one overt act, but he doesn't have that many. And the most overt acts that Alex Cox did was concerning Tammy over the children. You have, let's see. Lori did 14 out of 25. Chad did 8 out of 25. And Alex did 8 out of 25. So there's 8. Excuse me, I misspoke earlier to say 3. He does have 3 charges of conspiracy to commit murder. But he has 8 acts, overt acts, okay? Another one that he has, Alex Cox attempted to shoot Tammy Daybell on October 9th of 2019. Now, how is the state going to prove that? How is the state going to prove that Alex Cox was the one with the so-called paintball gun outside of Tammy's? It could have been Lori. It could have been anybody. It could have been Jason Mao. It could have been anybody. How is the state going to prove that overt act, right? Because overt acts lean into criminal intent. Then you got Alex Cox conducted multiple internet searches between the dates of October 8th and October 12th, including searches related to Grindle Drop and shooting through a Dodge Dakota. Now, first of all, they didn't have a Dodge Dakota, and we know that the state's not going to bring in evidence of the attempt on Brandon's life shooting through the Jeep. Okay, they're not going to do that. This is not what this case, that is not listed in the indictment. Whatever went on with the attempt on Brandon's life, it's not going to go in, it's not going to come into evidence. It's just not. I don't see how it would. It would be very severe if it did. And John Pryor wants those prior acts of Alex and Lori brought in from Arizona, but I mean, the relevance of it, the relevance of attempting to murder Tammy and then finally seeing it through, I could see that. But Grindle Drop and shooting through a Dodge Dakota, I mean, he could have been searching that for any reason. And if he already tried to take her out on the night, and he was having these searches after the fact, up to the 12th, really, what does that say? I guess the state would have to throw in there the day before Tammy was shot at, Lori was taking pictures of ammo in some ammo shop. Then you got Alex going to a gun range in the months before October 9th when the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell takes place. Well, they've listed it. They've listed it in the indictment that there was an attempt on Tammy's life in at least two of these overt acts. And the bottom line is that Alex was known for years to carry guns. He probably has a record of going to shooting ranges. I mean, y'all know how guilty as hell I know he is, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here. The state needs to have their ducks in a row. Then you got Alex traveled from Sportsman's Warehouse to the vicinity of the Daybell residence on October 9th of 2019. Okay, well, that right there lends into the other overt act that he took a shot at Tammy Daybell. But again, he lived not too far from Chad and Tammy. He was friends with Chad. I don't know, what all the state's going to, I guess, expound on in that. But, I mean, it is a healthy inference of it. And Alex was in the church parking lot approximately 2.5 miles from the Daybell residence on the night of October 18th. Now, we're talking about the 18th, going into the 19th. And she was found that morning, so Chad says, and Garth says. The bottom line is that is a healthy inference in and of itself. And what's interesting is, again, if it's showing in the indictment that Alex took a shot, he attempted to murder Tammy. And then again, it's showing in the indictment under the overt acts that Alex was actually nearby when she ended up dying. Why isn't he charged with first-degree murder of Tammy? But Lori and Chad are, Chad is, he is charged with first-degree murder. Lori is just conspiracy to commit murder on Tammy. It's very interesting, is it not, how they've got it worked out? The grand jury came up with all this. So, we look at all of that. And this is what I want to make clear on what we're going to go into next in terms of factual statutes, codes, and jury instructions. That in order for Lori to commit felony grand theft of Social Security benefits for JJ and Tylee, what had to happen? That was a felony. What would have had to happen? She would have, in a definition of it, if she'd have given the children back to, say, Kay and them and continued to collect it, she could have gotten charged with that. Or say she took the kids and she put them off in a bunker and had somebody watching them for more than a month. This is according to law. Then she continued to collect that, and the kids were still alive, but she was collecting it and not giving the money toward their care. She could have gotten charged. But you and I both know, in this case, how she was able to be charged with committing grand theft, and that is that she murdered the children and continued to collect the benefits. That you murder the kids, you're creating grand theft out of that. All right, you got felony murder, you got felony grand theft right there. All because you murdered the kids and continued to collect that money. In order for Chad to commit insurance fraud, okay? I mean, I guess there's different ways you can commit insurance fraud without murdering your wife and collecting on it. So those options are there. But in this case, we know that he had to murder Tammy in order to do what? Commit felony insurance fraud. So Alex wasn't in charge at all of the children's benefits. If anything was done in any of that, whether it was Lori calling the Social Security Administration, whether it was taking Tylee's JP Morgan account and putting it in her account, whatever it was, you didn't need Alex to conspire with Lori to commit that financial fraud. And this spills over also. You didn't need Alex to conspire or help or any way at all to commit insurance fraud. And that's what Chad did. Chad did this all himself. Alex was not involved in any of the insurance fraud or the grand theft or anything. But I'll tell you what, it's interesting that Alex did not have a job, was able to leave Zulema with just a little money. What was it, $4,000 to $6,000? And the fact that he could afford an apartment separate from Lori's that he never stayed in. And the fact that he had money for anything. Lori was financing him. But again, Alex is not charged in any of that. Only Chad and Lori. So, in conclusion on that aspect, when the grand jury got together, all right, to indict Chad and Lori on these charges, the bottom line is they couldn't just go in there and not be looking at some form of law, definitions of the laws, jury instructions, anything like that. And it also would answer for me why. Why wouldn't Alex be charged with first-degree murder if Chad and Lori are charged with that separate from conspiracy to commit murder? The state can prove Chad and Lori actually murdered these victims, Tylee and JJ and Tammy, or they would have never, first of all, it would have never been put in an indictment by grand jury members looking at the witness testimony at the grand jury, the evidence that the state had that the grand jury looked at. It was up to the grand jury to tailor these indictments. It was up to the grand jury to do all of this. So they had to look at something, so let's look at it. And many of us already know about this, but this will answer a lot. Now I want you to think about it again. Why wasn't Alex charged with first-degree murder when all of us, most of us anyway, believe Alex actually did murder JJ and Tylee, and that Chad actually did murder Tammy, but Alex was charged with conspiracy with Chad and Lori to murder Tammy. You see what I'm saying? So I looked at the indictment and I looked at the Idaho codes that was listed under each charge so that I would know what the state is saying. Hey, they've been charged with this, and here's the code that defines it. 18-4001 was the first one, murder defined. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being, including, but not limited to, a human embryo or fetus, with malice aforethought or the intentional application of torture to a human being, which results in the death of a human being. Torture is the intentional infliction of extreme and prolonged pain with the intent to cause suffering. It shall also be torture to inflict on a human being extreme and prolonged acts of brutality, irrespective of proof of intent to cause suffering. The death of a human being caused by such torture is murder, irrespective of proof of specific intent to kill. Torture causing death shall be deemed the equivalent of intent to kill. So, the state does not think that Alex did these things to JJ and Tylee, because I just told you what murder was, they think they're going to prove that Lori and Chad did this murder. That's what the indictment says. They've been charged with first-degree murder. And you might again say, hey, KJ, the reason they charged them with first-degree murder is because they got them for conspiracy of murder. Well, if that's the case, then, y'all, Alex had 3 counts of conspiracy to murder. He's not listed as a first-degree murder perpetrator. You see what I'm saying? They're going to prove that Chad and Lori actually murdered the children. Now let's look at the 18-4002, which is listed in the indictment. Express and implied malice. Such malice may be expressed or implied. It is expressed that there is manifested a deliberate intention unlawfully to take away the life of a fellow creature. It is implied when no considerable provocation appears or when the circumstances attending the killing show an abandoned and malignant heart. And you know what? Lori was the mother of these children. She abandoned them. And she had a malignant heart too. And they're saying this the same with Chad as well. And not only with the children with Chad, but also his wife. But they don't have Alex with a first-degree murder charge. Again, it's my hypothesis. They didn't give Alex the first-degree charge, only conspiracy, because he's deceased and they didn't want to have to go through a trial proving that Alex actually murdered the children and Tammy, if that's the case. And then the defense say, well, if y'all sitting here trying to prove Alex actually physically murdered them, then there you go. Alex was the one that did the first degree murder, not my client, Chad or Lori. You see what I'm saying? Now, there are degrees of murder, and we know that it's first degree, but here there is an A through a G section, and I'm not going to go through all of it. What I do want to say is in the A section, all murder which is perpetrated by means of poison or lying in wait or torture, when torture is inflicted with the intent to cause suffering, to execute vengeance, to extort something from the victim, or to satisfy some sadistic inclination, or which is perpetrated by any kind of willful, deliberate, and premeditated killing, is murder in the first degree. And that speaks volumes to me. I'm going to tell you what, there is no doubt in my mind. This is my theory, but I believe it. They're going to prove that Tammy was poisoned. And they're also going to, the other stuff in here, inflicting, to suffer, to extort something, sadistic inclination. There's nothing more sadistic to me than Lori thinking that she can murder her children. And you know what? Yes, we think that Alex did the physical killings. But y'all, that's just maybe we don't want to wrap it around our heads that the mother of these children could have done this. She could have done this. Just as I've said in the past when we've discussed it. That blue blanket wasn't put on JJ because Alex or Chad. Lori could have been right there. Lori could have done this. They've charged her with first-degree murder. And it's being defined right in front of us here. So we get to the jury instructions of a grand jury that met to indict Chad and Lori on these charges. And I looked at it and it said, Idaho Criminal Jury Instructions 704C, first degree murder, murder in perpetrating or attempting to perpetrate a what? A felony. And guess what? Grand theft is a felony. Insurance fraud is a felony. It's listed in the indictment. It says, in order for a defendant to be guilty of first-degree murder in the perpetration of or attempt to perpetrate a felony, the state must prove each of the following. On or about this date, they got to prove that. And of course, that explains why there has to be these dates listed in the indictment. Number 2, that it happened in Idaho. That's a jurisdictional thing. It has to be done in there. And 3, that murder was committed in the perpetration or attempt to perpetrate an aggravated battery on a child under 12 years of age. And there's a list, so let's stop at this one. JJ was under 12 years of age, and you can be sure, y'all, that what they did to him, that to me, I don't see it any other way, is aggravated. It's an aggravated battery on a child, to duct tape them, to put garbage bags over. That's aggravation. That is the real deal. Then he goes on to talk about, It could be arson, rape, robbery, burglary, kidnapping, mayhem, an act of terrorism, weapon of mass destruction, biological weapon, or chemical weapon. I mean, it gives you a list of all these things. But again, this is when you're talking about murder in perpetrating or attempting to perpetrate a felony. And those are the financial crimes, y'all. Because again, like I said, when they murdered JJ and Tylee, that's when the Social Security fraud, that's what happened. When Chad murdered Tammy, what happens? He does insurance fraud. He couldn't do it without the murders. I mean, yes, there were other options, but this is what we got. They murdered these innocent children and Tammy, and they were perpetrating a crime, and that was insurance fraud. It can't just be they murdered the children and Tammy just to be together. They also did the financial crimes, which also is an aggravating factor in this capital death penalty case. The aggravating factor meaning murder for money. I mean, what other reason? They could have given the kids to Kay and Larry. Chad could have got a divorce. Even if they wanted to do, they can't, Chad can't do insurance fraud on his wife's insurance policy without her being murdered, right? And the children, Lori couldn't continue to collect benefits like that if the children were still alive and the benefits were going to them. They were murdered. Now listen, this is what the grand jury looked at before they indicted Chad and Lori. To prove Chad and Lori guilty of first-degree murder in this way, the state does not have to prove that the defendant intended to kill JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, but the state must prove that during the perpetration or attempt to perpetrate this insurance fraud, that the defendants, Chad and Lori, or another person who was acting in concert with the defendant in furtherance of a common scheme or plan to commit this felony, killed JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. That's where Alex Cox comes in. Yes, we know technically, if we wanted to really look at it, in our view, if Lori and Chad could be charged separately from conspiracy to commit murder, they can be charged separately for that with felony first-degree murder, then Alex Cox should have as well. But again, he's deceased, and the state doesn't want to have the added caseload. It would mess the whole thing up to prove that Alex did commit the first-degree murder. Because then the defense teams would be like, well, you proved Alex murdered them, so why are you charging Chad and Lori of the actual physical killings of these innocent victims? You see what I'm saying? If you find that the state has failed to prove any of the above, you must find the defendant not guilty of first-degree murder. If you find that all of the above have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then you must find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. And this seems like this jury instruction is for a trial jury. But again, if you'll look it up on Idaho statutes and codes, there isn't a separate instructions for grand jury members. It just says jury instructions. And so the state, when they got this grand jury together, they gave them the definitions, just as I've read the murder defined to y'all, the different degrees of it. And they also gave them this. I couldn't see it any other way because they're having to decide whether to indict them for not only conspiracy to murder, but felony first-degree murder. Now, let's stop for a minute and back up, okay? Because in these jury instructions that these grand jury members would have had to look at, there is murder in common law crime. And they would read this. They would read exactly what I'm fixing to read to you. Murder is a common law crime whose complete development requires several centuries. Though murder is frequently defined as the unlawful killing of another living human being with malice aforethought, In modern times, the latter phrase does not even approximate its literal meaning. Hence, it is preferable not to rely upon the misleading expression for an understanding of murder, but rather to consider the various types of murder which the common law came to recognize and which exist in most jurisdictions. Number 1, intent to kill murder. Number 2, intent to do serious bodily injury murder. Number 3, depraved heart murder. And number 4, felony murder. And again, that is murder in common law. And this is part of jury instructions that a grand jury would get. And by the way, it could also be given out in the upcoming trial of Chad and Lori. Also in these jury instructions, there are cases that are set that are precedent and a kind of a guide for these jurors, whether it's grand jury or trial jury. And one that is listed in this jury instruction is felony murder arising from a killing committed by an accomplice. All right? Well, this speaks volume. You think Alex did this all in a vacuum, that Lori and Chad didn't have nothing to do with it? Or do you think that Lori and Alex both together in concert physically murdered those 2 children? You see what I'm saying? Or did Alex and Chad, because Alex in the overt acts was near the house the night that Tammy was murdered. But listen to this. This is interesting. In State versus Pena, the court, and this was back in 2010, so this isn't way back there in history in precedent in Idaho. The court addressed the question of when a defendant who did not do the actual killing could be found guilty of felony murder. The court weighed which of the 2 theories of liability should be adopted. The agency theory. Okay, now listen, you're learning something if you'll listen. They were saying, okay, what are we supposed to put up against this when there's an accomplice, and that one of the accomplices didn't actually murder, say Lori didn't actually murder, Alex did the murder. Which theory, which things should we lay up against that in order to determine this? And one was the agency theory or the proximate cause theory. Now let's break this down. Now listen, you're learning. You're learning legalese if you'll open your mind. Now listen, apply it to this case. In the United States, there are 2 theories of how the felony murder rule applies to parties that did not actually kill the victims, including agency and proximate cause. Under the agency theory, the felony murder rule is only applied to actors who are acting in concert in furtherance of what, y'all? A common scheme or plan. This is one of the most major conspiracy to commit murder cases that old KJ's ever seen. It's a common scheme or plan to commit the underlying felony, and one of them causes the death during the perpetration of the felony, regardless of who actually fired the fatal shot. So there you go on that one. Think about that. That is actually the agency theory. Now we're going to go to the proximate theory. Regardless of who actually fired the fatal shot, the proximate cause is defined in that. Under the proximate cause theory, each actor is held responsible for the death of a person caused during the perpetration of a felony if it was reasonably foreseeable that the acts committed might reasonably be expected to result in death. Under such interpretations of the proximate cause theory, A person involved in the perpetration of a felony can be held liable for a death even though the death was actually caused by a third person having nothing to do with the perpetration of the felony. So, let's stop and let's look at that. We know that Chad and Lori, they were knee-deep in terms of the financial felony crimes that they committed. But if Chad wants to say he had no idea, that Lori and Alex did this to Charles Vallow, say, for instance, because they thought they were going to get the $1 million. The bottom line is that the person having nothing to do with the perpetration of the felony, if Chad could prove that he had nothing to do, which we know different, but if Chad could say, and they could prove it, that Chad didn't know that Lori and Alex had done this for Charles Vallow's insurance money, even though we know that she told Chad that she wasn't going to get the money. Let's just for sake of argument, the bottom line is that unless that could be proven, and they have this knowledge right now that Chad knew about the money that Lori wasn't going to get, he could be charged with that, which, again, y'all know me. I told y'all he should have been charged in Charles Vallow's murder or the conspiracy to commit murder on Charles Vallow. Then we get to State versus Pena. The court concluded that the Idaho statutes and case law, as well as the common law incorporated in Idaho law, supports the agency theory. Consequently, a defendant who has not done the actual killing may be convicted of first-degree murder under the felony murder rule only if the killing was done by another person who was acting in concert with the defendant in furtherance of a common plan or scheme to commit the underlying felony and in the commission or attempted commission of the underlying felony. So, we know that when you look at the financial crimes of Lori and Chad, it doesn't say that Chad has been charged with helping Lori with her Social Security fraud, her grand theft. And it doesn't show Lori helping Chad in his insurance fraud of Tammy. But it does show the felony of conspiracy to commit murder and felony murder. So you see that they are working in concert with one another. Death during the stream of events. And this is a jury instruction under this that I know the grand jury had to have looked at before they came out with this indictment. You think of it, the stream of events. We've talked about this. We said this was a snowball effect. It started in Arizona. It all went through the attempt on Brandon's life, the murders of the children, and then Tammy. It was all going through there. It was a stream of events. The statute specifies that the murder be committed during the commission or attempted commission of the enumerated felonies. Case law extends this time frame to a death occurring during the stream of events constituting the crime. In State versus Federally, the defendant who was charged with felony murder during the commission of a burglary argued that the burglary was committed at the time the murder occurred. The defendant, along with another, entered the victim's home with the intent to steal personal belongings on the evening of September 6, 1983, and then remained in the victim's home until the victim returned the next morning, at which time he was killed. So the felony theft, it was committed one day, and these people, they did the act. They did it. They stole from this homeowner. But they waited overnight, and the next day, what did they do? They committed another, it was a stream of events. They stole, then they murdered the homeowner. Does that not sound familiar? They murdered those children and did what? Committed felony financial crimes. Either way it goes. The defendant was charged and the jury convicted him of felony murder against the claim that the the theft was complete at the time the victim was killed, the court stated, quote, Grammer's death was part of a stream of events which began the evening Featherly and Windsor entered Grammer's home and ended the following day when Grammer's possessions were removed from the home. In State versus Hokanson, the defendant carried a bomb. Now listen, y'all, this might not seem like it's relevant, but if you look at this stream of events that this case has, you'll understand, and this is in jury instructions, this is one of the reasons I feel that this murder indictment happened. I've come to the conclusion that Alex Cox was not given a charge in the indictment of the separate felony first-degree murder because he's deceased. But this explains why Lori and Chad are charged with felony first-degree murder, and it ain't just because they've got conspiracy to commit murder on there. This is separate. This is actually saying that Lori and Chad did it, but it's got legalese included in it. It's not that I'm saying Lori and Chad actually murdered the kids. Alex most definitely probably did this. But again, where's the evidence? We'll find out. It says here in State versus Hokanson, the defendant carried a bomb into a drugstore in order to commit a robbery. The robbery was thwarted by the victim and the bomb was cast aside. Okay, so this character came in there with a bomb, wanting to commit a robbery. He threatened everyone with the bomb. He completed that robbery, which is a felony, and the bomb was cast aside. As the police officer was picking up the bomb package, apparently to disarm it after all that was over with, it exploded, killing the officer. Okay? The defendant was convicted of felony murder. The court noted that homicide is committed in perpetration of the felony if the killing and the felony are part of a continuous transaction. There's no doubt, y'all, that the children and Tammy, that was felony murder. They conspired to murder. That's felony too. But it was a stream of events. It went from murder to financial felony crimes. Okay? You see what I'm saying? The court also noted that liability would be imposed where the conduct causing the death was done in furtherance of the design to commit the felony. A person is criminally liable for the natural and probable consequences of his or her unlawful acts, as well as unlawful forces set in motion during the commission of an unlawful act. The appellant voluntarily set in motion an instrumentality which carried a very real probability of causing great bodily harm. Death ensued, and the fact the appellant was under arrest does not erase criminal liability. So you think about it. This person came in with a bomb. They robbed the store. They were able to get them, put them in jail. And at the crime scene there, this police officer went over there to disarm the package or whatever that he was threatening everyone with. And he gets, basically, that's felony murder, because even though that person wasn't there, even though Chad and Lori might not have been there when JJ and Tylee were murdered, maybe it was Alex all the way, they're still charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. So, you just keep that in mind and remember this. Just remember this. The financial crimes of Chad and Lori were all part of the whole plan. Because, everyone says the children were murdered because they thought there were zombies in them or this or that. If that's the case, okay, if Chad and Lori really believed that the zombies and the kids needed their spirits released so that they could go on to be at peace or whatever it was, then why even get into financial crimes? Why, if Tammy, since 2015, Chad saw beyond the veil that she was going to die, right? And it's proven that it was murder. And then the murder could not have been just so he could be with Lori. It had to have been so he could get money. So you think about all that, and if you lay it all out there all together, Alex Cox was not charged in the indictment of first-degree murder, separate from conspiracy to commit murder. He was only charged with 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 on JJ, 1 on Tylee, and 1 on Tammy. He was not charged with the actual, there was nothing in there, because the state has to focus in on Chad and Lori and proving their first-degree murder. They're not, they're going to prove the conspiracy of the murder, but they're also going to separately, because Lori is not charged with first-degree murder on Tammy Daybell, but Chad is. Lori is charged with first-degree murder of her own children, which could be that she actually did physically murder her own children with another person or whatever. She could have done it by herself. Chad could have, by himself, murdered Tammy, or Alex could have came down there. He was there the night before, close by. He could have went down there with Chad, could have helped Chad physically put their hands around her neck or do all the things they did to those children. But in this case, when you've got conspiracy to commit murder and it's intertwined in Idaho statute and code, the bottom line is that the way that this indictment is put together, remember a while back they said there's no such thing as first-degree murder and grand theft by deception. You need to split those up. Remember the defense said that? No. The jury instructions that I just read to y'all that could have been used for the grand jury that indicted them, or these jury instructions that I read to you that could be used in a trial for Chad and Lori. The state's not going to want to go in there, and that's shitting in your own shoe, really, to say, well, for the principle of it, let's go ahead and charge Alex with first-degree murder. First of all, do they have evidence of that? If they have evidence that he conspired with Lori and Chad to kill all of them, then there should be some evidence there. But again, why would the state want to prove that Alex actually did the physical murders? Because if they could prove it, then what's that say for John Pryor and Archie? Hey, y'all proved it. You got evidence right here. Exculpatory evidence. Exculpatory evidence meaning it makes our clients look good that it was Alex that actually did the physical murders. Why are you charging my client Chad or Lori? Well, because they don't have to actually be there in first-degree murder. They don't have to. I just read it to you. So they're screwed either way it goes. So anyway, I hope this makes sense to y'all. Please leave your comments. Let me know. Why wouldn't the state go ahead and charge Alex Cox with first-degree murder like they did Chad and Lori? They all did it together. We all think it was Alex that did the heavy lifting. Why not put it in there? And if we were right, and we knew that Alex was the ones that he was the actual one that murdered JJ and Tylee, then why wouldn't that, and there's evidence there. Why wouldn't the state want to go ahead and prove that? Because they can prove that Lori and Chad wanted Alex to do that. So why not go ahead and do that? It's a little confusing, but what it comes down to is that Chad and Lori actually, they not only conspired, but they are actually, by Idaho law, it's no different than actually murdering. Lori actually murdering the children, or Chad actually murdering Tammy. Not just conspiring to do it. So, anyway, that's something that always, it was a question. It was always a question like, well, if you look at everything that we do know, it had to have been Alex that did the heavy lifting. And if Alex actually did the heavy lifting and he's been charged with conspiracy, then why wouldn't he be charged with first-degree murder? You see, maybe it's because he's deader than a doornail and burning in hell, for all we know. But by Idaho law, Lori and Chad, they are murderers. They're not only conspirators, but they are murderers. So leave your comments. Tell me what you think. I love you all. Hope this all made sense. The bottom line is that Alex didn't have many overt acts in the indictment. In fact, the most overt acts he had was toward the murder of Tammy over the children. There was only one listed for what he did in terms of that had anything to do with the children. And you got Lori and Chad being charged with first-degree murder. Well, I can't wait to see what that's all about. Can they prove Lori actually physically murdered her own children? We'll just have to wait and see. Next time we get together, we're going to go over some more of the death penalty. But I love you all. Have a great weekend. See you Monday and keep on looking.